Welcome back to another episode of Recovery APN. I'm Dan and I'm your host, and I'm joined by Keith.
Hey Dan, it's good to be back. Excited to be on the podcast with you as always.
Yes. You finally got one under your belt.
I got one under. It was nerve-wracking, but you made it painless and fun, and it was really cool talking to Elle Woods last week, and I'm looking forward to talking to Dave.
Well, first and foremost, you did a phenomenal job.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind.
Last week's was great. I hope everyone enjoyed. And this week we have Dave. And Dave was just as enjoyable. Dave had more of a traditional story. And what I liked about he went into a lot of his journey bouncing back from treatment to treatment.
Yeah, it's cool to have that insight from someone who's done several stays and seen what's worked for them and then been through the APN system and it's going great.
Yeah, what I liked most about it was how authentic he was and how truthful. And he talks about it wasn't necessarily the treatment centers that he went to. He wasn't putting the blame on them. He was more taking accountability on himself. And that makes sense to me. That resonated with me because at the end of the day, the individual has to be willing to get better and willing to do all the necessary steps. And previously, he maybe wasn't.
Yeah, it's clear that his success now is an accumulation of all the places he was treated, and that's really cool. And APN's a great place, and it's awesome to be the last place in that cycle for him.
For sure, and I think this episode is going to resonate with a lot of individuals, and especially those that have maybe bounced around from treatment center to treatment center. And I think a lot of people are going to enjoy it. So without further ado, enjoy the episode.
Looking forward to it. Let's go.
David, thank you for coming on.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. It's great to be here.
On our show, what we like to do is kind of share our guest's journey. And that journey consisting of what ultimately brought you to APN. So what your life was like before, what you came to APN for, what your experience was at APN, the treatment plan, the relationships you built here, whether it be with the community or a staff member, and ultimately what tools you took from APN that's, allowed you to build the life kind of worth living, as Dustin would say, right?
Yep, for sure.
How do you start your renaissance?
Yeah.
So diving into that, kind of let's talk about like the pre-APN days.
Yeah.
What was that like?
So when it comes to recovery, I'll try to spare a lot of details, and at the same time, a lot of it is relevant. So going back to like college days, I was what I would say was pretty normal in college. Smoked a lot of weed, did some other hard stuff here and there. But amazingly enough, when I left college, I told myself, okay, that's it. And it was for quite a while. And got married, had 3 kids, and somewhere in the late 90s, hurt my back. And just saying that, I'm sure you already know where this is going to go. And it started with like codeine pills, for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't too long, and started getting hooked on those and started finding something stronger, and then finding more, and then finding more doctors. And all of a sudden, I'm doing all this crazy crap, right? And so in 2003, I went actually to my first rehab spot. And I was scared to death. I was like, how the hell did I get here?
Right.
And what's happened to me and all that. And after that,
where was that?
Yeah, I don't want to throw out names if that's okay.
What state?
But it was in Kansas.
Oh, cool.
Yep. And after that, things were good for quite some time. Into good recovery, sober. Had a good 4 or 5 years where straight up 100% sober, and everything was going well. And eventually, with addiction being a definite cause or part of things, ended up in a divorce. And so at that point, that was 2006, I think, and looking back, it was a slow, very slow kind of creep back into the addiction behaviors. And eventually getting back to the substance and doing all of that. During the entire time, I never had a drink. But I was back into taking pills, and a lot of pills, a lot of, dark web stuff and things like that. I'm down on the streets of KC at 2 o'clock in the morning at one point looking for heroin because I got so desperate. And so there was a 15-year period between '03 and the next time I went to a rehab place. And during that time, I had countless seizures, a couple at home, several at work. Thank God I never had any in the car, on a stairway or anything like that. And so that next spot was in 2018. And so from 2018 until 2022, there were 4 more stops. And that's when it was the spiral out of control. Things were just getting super ugly. Lost a great job, well-paying job. Had a great girlfriend that things, of course, got super rocky. And she just backed away and said, I cannot do this. And so there was 1 in 18, 1 in 19, 2 in 2021. And when I left that place for the second time in 2021, it wasn't too long. And I should clarify that during this time, I had convinced myself, you know what, the one thing that never was a problem was booze. And if you'd have told me that I was going to be the guy that turned into the person driving to work at 6 a.m. with a handle of rum in my car, I never, ever would have believed it. I was sipping on the way to work. I was sipping at work. I was sipping on the way home and everything in between. And so that's when it started to spiral and get really out of control. There was a DUI. And again, thank God, nobody else involved. I kind of wrecked my car and spent some time in jail. That didn't do it. That wasn't enough. And there were about 2 more years after that. And so this was now into COVID. And I mean, we were all crazy in COVID, but when you're in the dark spiral of addiction, it's even worse. And I was just trying to hold on. And ultimately, so about a year ago, I went back to Iowa. I have a memorial golf tournament for my dad every year. He passed away in 2017. And by the way, that was like another large, deeper leap into the depths. I just went off the rails. So anyway, when I got back from that, and my kids were there, my mother was there, a lot of old friends were there. And I was looking through the pictures, and I was 235 pounds. Sitting here today, I'm about $190.
I was about to say, you do not look anything over 200 right now.
Well, thank you. And I looked in the mirror, I broke down, and this was the first time that it wasn't a divorce, it wasn't a job loss, it wasn't my kids saying, we're sick of this, it wasn't losing a girlfriend. It was the first time where I, on my own, without any other push, prod, anything, I just decided, okay, you're at that point, you're at that jumping off point, that literal jumping off point. You can either go try to save this or you are going to die. My liver was about ready to explode. You could see it from the outside. I look in the mirror and I could see it swollen up. And so I got online. And at the time I lived in Castle Rock, and the first thing that popped up was APN. And I also had another buddy that I was at a different place with who ended up coming here. And he had turned me on to APN. And on August 31st of last year, 2022, is when I rolled in.
So are you celebrating 1 year, God willing, next month?
September 1. Yep.
Incredible. Yeah. So many things that you talked about I can relate to. And again, it's put our stories up, they're side by side. It's totally different, right? But there's so many things that are similar in it, right? I hated booze, right? I hated booze. and I never liked the taste. I never liked the smell. I never liked being like hungover. I didn't. But when I did drink, I just drank to get fucked up. But what was difficult for me in the beginning was I always thought, like when I, like years ago when I tried to get sober, I had the same mentality, like it was just the pills. And like, so I like go out and have a glass of wine or a beer, whatever it was. And it didn't lead me to like continuing the drinking, but it led me after like a few drinks to be like, okay, you know, the mind altering said like, okay, I'm just going to go to the drugs. And I had that mentality of it wasn't the drinking. And now like in this current sobriety with over 2 years, it's like I am a drug addict and I am an alcoholic.
Yep.
Regardless if I love drugs and hate alcohol, I still consider myself an alcoholic.
Yep.
And I think it's very difficult for people to relate to that when, you know, early on, when they're like, they didn't like something and they're just like, yeah, like when you're an addict or an alcoholic, you're both at that point. Whether or not, if you like it or not, like you have that mentality.
Yep.
At least that's what I think.
Yeah, completely agreed.
So you get to APN, and I guess before jumping into your experience at APN, what was it like with the conversations with your family about, you know, going back to treatment again, and what was that like to have to talk to them about it?
You know, at that point, they've always been loving and supporting, which I consider myself so fortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Were they pissed at times? Yep. Disappointed at times? Yep, of course. And by this time, you know, they're just like, for crying out loud, Dad, please go figure this out. You know, we love you and we want you back as our dad. But the way things have been the last few years, you know, you can't be for many, many reasons. Mm-hmm. And so they were, I wouldn't even call it tough love, but they were just like, okay, great, please go do it again, you know, and they've seen this, right? And so they probably had a little bit of pessimism, like, all right,
sure,
here it goes again. But at the same time, just to have, you know, it not be get out of our lives, don't ever want to see you again, anything like that, that was enough.
Yeah, and I'm sure creates that little motivation too.
Yep.
Where it removes like the resentment piece, where it's like, why they don't understand what I'm going through, and it's more like motivation that like you see them clear, and it's like, wow, they care about me, they want me to get better.
Yeah, for sure.
That's great. And so you talked about you were living in Colorado, you found APN, a buddy came. I guess before, I don't know if I want to ask this now, but I guess I will. What was different about APN than the other places?
Yeah, it's a great question. And for me personally, just about every other place that I went to, first and foremost, you know, nothing was a failure on their part. I want to make that very clear.
100%.
Yeah. Nothing whatsoever to do with the places that I had been. It had everything to do with me not, you know, making the full dive, making the full commitment, making the full surrender. That said, you know, it wasn't until I got here that I realized, holy moly, how different this place is. It was so much more than do the steps, go to meetings, get a sponsor, good luck. It was so much more a deep dive into the psycho-behavior therapy, all of that stuff that I had kind of gotten pieces of, you know, throughout the past few years. But I mean, from day one, walking in here, we dove in, and especially with Dustin, and just started drilling down and quickly got to a couple of things that I really never had touched on that opened up a whole new can and just opened my eyes to, wow, there's a lot of stuff from the past and younger days that I now realize it wasn't anybody else's fault, but they were things that had happened that, you know, kind of formed me into who I am and who I was. And it opened my eyes to that. And that was a huge part of being here for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like how you said that. And I would echo everything you just said about making sure those other places aren't to blame.
Yep.
Because I went through a similar scenario where I went to one treatment center a few years, maybe a year before APN. And it's a great facility. Now, was I ready? Absolutely not. Did I go out of despite, and did I go out of resentment towards family and friends forcing me to go? Absolutely. When I went there and when I left there, I didn't want to be sober.
Yep.
And so I had nothing to do with them, nothing to do with their program, facility, so be it. However, similar to you, when I walked into APN, I just felt comfortable. I felt comfortable being vulnerable. And again, timing, right? I was ready, willing, and able. But that level of comfortability, the level of guidance, and I always say this, APN is a great place, but I think it has to do with where my mindset was and where I was in life and the willingness I had and how desperate I was, with the combination of Dustin. I think he, whatever it was in him and whatever he said, whatever he said to do, I did. And I think, and I'm curious if you felt this, he, as an individual therapist and a primary therapist, I felt like I wasn't a number. I wasn't, okay, client 72. I was Dan. And he was vested in my personal growth and in my personal sobriety.
Completely agree 100%. Yeah, and one of the first things, I've remembered this ever since, one of the first things he said was, what if the stories that we believe about ourselves are not true? And it still makes me emotional to this day, because the further down that rabbit hole you go, you start believing a lot of shit about yourself that is not good. And to hear somebody say, what if you're not a piece of shit? What if you're not a failure as a dad? What if you're not, all of these bad things you tell yourself, what if they're not true? And that was kind of like the initial comment from when I got here that just kind of bounced me into the whole stay. And he was amazing. As a personal therapist, could not have asked for anything better, anything more. And yes, I felt so much like an individual and not like a number.
Yeah. And listen, I think all of our therapists are great. We just happen to share the same one. So we'll talk about him. But I think he just has, as someone in recovery, that, you sit down, it's like you tip the cap, right? Where it's like, wow, I believe what he's saying. He's done it. He's walked the line before. But I also like what you said, right? When he said to you, it's like, what if all the thoughts that you've made sure that to believe in, of being an absentee father, or me being like a dickhead and judgmental and all these things, and what if those weren't true? What if you took a poll of the audience and they said the absolute opposite? And then it's like, wow, I believed all this stuff I was telling myself. And I remember he said to me, he's like, think about all the cool shit you do in your life. And I was just like, yeah, I've done some cool shit. He was like, imagine you remembered all that and you got to think back on it and looked at it from a different perspective. I was like, oh, wow. Yeah, you're right. Because you think about all the stuff you've done, and I was like, I could remember half of it, right? Or not much in detail. He's like, you could still do all that stuff, but actually enjoy it more and look back on it and remember it and have awesome memories. And I'm like, huh. Interesting, right? And it just makes you think, and it's like, wow, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yep.
And I'd like to kind of dive into the process group and what that was like for you.
Yep. So it was all guys, which I know, especially in my case personally, was wonderful. It was an extremely tight group. Felt like you could be honest, vulnerable, tell them anything, and not have to worry about judgment and things like that. And it was something I every morning when I woke up, I looked forward to going in there and going through that group. And as you know, you laugh, you cry, you get pissed, you go through it all, but it's so therapeutic for the soul and, for your body, for your mind, for everything. And just to see and hear and, communicate with other guys that are going through the exact same crap and can relate to the exact same crap is really cool.
Yeah, I think something that's a common theme on our show and talking to our alumni is community.
Yep.
And when you surround yourself with like-minded individuals, you just have this level of comfort where you're like, it's okay to be authentic. It's okay to, be open and honest because you know that you're not being judged and people are here to support you.
Yeah. It's funny. Dustin's got a sense of humor, as you know.
Yeah.
And the day we met, I admitted to him, I told him, I said, I'm the A+ rehab student. He's like, I know you are. He knew it in 5 seconds. Yeah. He's like, you're not going to be late to class. You're going to participate. You're going to do all that stuff you're supposed to do. And that was so true. But he said, because of that, I want you to set that aside. And he said, hell, I want you to show up late one day just to be late. And I want you to talk without having to think about what you're going to say first and what anybody's going to think about it and what the best sales pitch is on this answer. Try to put all that stuff, to the side. And just hearing that made me realize he gets me. He absolutely gets me. And if you're got a background in sales and you're in addiction, you can bullshit with anybody and you can convince anybody. And that's a whole nother discussion. But, for anybody listening, if you're hiding, convincing, pulling the wool over everybody's eyes, number one, you may think you are, but you probably aren't. But don't try to go down that path of being the hero and think, I'm going to be a man, I'm going to take care of this myself. I don't want to hurt anybody, so I'm going to make them aware. I don't want to be a burden. That's the worst thing you can do. If you can especially catch it early and just say, I need help. It's so hard for guys, but just, I need help.
Totally. And I'm getting emotional thinking about it because something you said was, for me, in my I guess after I was in active addiction, a big piece of what I've created in my mind was that I was a chameleon, and I thought that was my best character trait. I can go into any room and act a certain way so the people in that room thought I was this person, and then I'd walk into another room and the people in that room thought I was that person. I can keep up with these people and I keep up with those people, and I was just catering to everyone. And I thought that was just magical character trait that I had that no one else had. And I look back on it and it's just it's more of I don't want to say weakness, but it's almost like a character fault of mine where I wasn't comfortable in my own skin to be authentic and be myself and show up in a room and be like, this is who I am.
Yep.
And I'm okay with that. And again, to your point, Dustin called me out on that, and I was till that day when he called me out, I was like, all right, I could do that.
Yeah.
Right. And then he was like, dude, why do that? Why be someone you're not? And I think it's to exactly what you said. I built up this persona of wanting to be someone I wasn't because of what others thought. And I needed help to get back and revert back to myself. And there was this stigma around it where do I want the help? Do I need the help? Why can't I do this on my own? I'm able to make a living. I'm able to do this. I don't want anyone's help. Let me figure this out on my own. Mm-hmm. And I think opening up my ears and shutting my mouth was the best thing I could have done.
Putting that ego aside.
Yeah. But it's APN, it's just an incredible facility, and the staff. I'm kind of curious on what other things I guess you took advantage of while you were here and what sticks out to you.
Yeah, so a couple other things. I mean, all the therapists are great.
Right.
First and foremost, the gym is phenomenal. And I know it's kind of a trait of a lot of folks that come in that they're gonna turn their addiction to the gym, and they're in that thing 3 hours every day, maybe sometimes twice a day, and I'm gonna get ripped and I'm gonna get in shape and all that stuff. For me personally, that actually is a huge part of recovery. It gets my endorphins cranked up. It relieves stress and anxiety. And I started in the day I got here, and quite frankly, I haven't shut it off since I left. I got a Peloton bike when I walked out the door, and I'm on that thing every day now and all that good stuff. But I'd rather have that addiction
Totally.
than a lot of other crap. Meals, holy moly. I mean, you're not going to have a lack of choices, and you're going to have healthy choices. And if you don't want healthy choices, you're going to have that too, and that's great. But yeah, the food and the nutrition is just off the charts. And, not just having a gym, but having yoga and other activities like that as well. Yeah, just the whole thing. And of course, the setting. I mean, it's peaceful on its own just to walk out the door and look out there. I mean, mountains, still snow-capped in July. It's just a beautiful, beautiful setting.
Yeah, I think what happens is a lot of people need to spend in their active addiction. A lot of people spend a lot of time preparing to use, on the chase to use, coming down, whatever it is. So a lot of your time is taken up from using, the act of using or whatever. And so they need to replace that time. And to your point, I think a lot has to do with wellness. And I think the gym is a great addition to your life to take on the time of using. So I would agree with you. A lot of people tend to do that, and we do have a great gym. And also just the yoga piece of being comfortable and sitting in, whether you're good at yoga or not, you're in your own head during it, and to be able to be comfortable in that and sit in it and sit in thought. And I think, yeah, those activities are great. And I'm kind of curious on what it was like to surround yourself with the community and build relationships with peers and I guess other clients.
Yep. So, made quite a few good buddies. And, we talked about one of them earlier. Just, you have folks that you stay in touch with and see on whenever you can. And that part is awesome. Now, I will also tell you, in the past, I had a couple times gone to places where I was probably too social, and gone to places where, I had to, I wanted to be the first to volunteer, to do this, lead this, take care of that, clean the table, whatever it was. And when I came here, I had convinced myself, you know what, for once you're just going to put your head down and you're going to do the work. And I committed to, I don't want to be part of any drama. I don't want to be part of any, do I want to be social? Yes. And I hope this doesn't come out wrong, but I didn't come here to make friends. Now I did make some, but that wasn't the objective. I came here to hopefully finally figure this shit out.
No, I think it didn't come out wrong at all. I think sometimes when people come here, they don't have the right priorities in place. And I think the first and foremost is and you talked about it and you said it perfectly, but coming in and saying, I'm here to figure my shit out and I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to be willing to get uncomfortable. I'm going to be willing to listen. I'm going to put my head down. I'm not going to, if it's a curfew's at 10 o'clock, I'm going to be in my bed at 10 o'clock and do all the right things.
Yep.
Right. And it's I'm going to follow the rules. And I think when you do that, you authentically find those individuals that are kind of on that straight and narrow path, and you start to build a community and surround yourself with the right people.
Yep.
Because when you don't, what you find yourself is you surround yourself with the wrong people that may or may not be here for the right reasons. And I think sometimes when you're on that path, you start to inspire others, and you do it randomly, right? Look what David is doing. Look at the path he's on. Look how he's making strides. And they say in AA, attraction rather than promotion, right? They started being attracted to you because of all the things you're doing, and then ultimately helping others in that community.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I, even when I walked out of here, I had a few guys in my process group say, didn't really see you a lot involved in, whether it be our hikes or our watching the game or whatever it was, but yet you seem like, you really found something here and that you've got a good base to walk out the door with. And again, that's what I came here for. So, yeah, it was just such an amazing experience.
Were you surprised by any friendships? I know you weren't here to make friends, but was there anyone that you connected with in a way that you were like, oh, that's a totally different type of friend for me?
Yeah. I mean, my initial roommate, honestly, not someone I would probably have hung out with socially, really had any kind of association with at all. And of course, we became real close. And, different people, different places, different lifestyles. And at the same time, he's a great dude. And last I heard from him, he was doing well. So
incredible.
Just things like that. When you've done this enough times, you realize that when you walk out, you're going to get a group text from 20 people the first week. And by 6 months down the road, you might hear from 2. And that's because everybody has filtered out into their own communities, trying to hopefully find their own groups, their own connections back home and things like that. Some people stay in touch with other folks forever, which is awesome.
Yeah, I would say this. It's sad, but this is a true statement. You go to treatment and you're in a community of 70 people. There's not going to be a lot of people that are success stories that time around. And I think a lot has to do with, what their priorities are.
Yep.
I take a look back into my process group. I think of like 1 or 2 people out of 10 that are still sober, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I just think that a lot of us had different, had different circumstances, had different rock bottoms, and ultimately some of us were willing to go to any lengths, and some of us kind of stopped a little bit, and
just not ready,
and they weren't ready. So and that's okay.
Yep. I mean, I can relate.
Yeah, same.
I was that guy. I mean, when you decide to get back into the addiction, the last thing you want to do is read that group text from the people that are still in recovery, right?
Totally.
Going to block your ass, leave me alone, don't try to call me.
What do they know? They don't get me. They don't understand what I'm going through. Totally.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious. How long were you here for?
About 2 months.
2 months.
Yeah.
So you're getting ready to leave, right? And talk me through like what your aftercare planning was, and then kind of what it looked like when you got home.
Yep. So I went to IOP down in Denver for about, how long was that? Probably 6 or 8 weeks. And that was really good. I'm glad I did it, really necessary. That was kind of like a segue back into the world. Mm-hmm. And that was really good. So then I still lived in Castle Rock at the time. I hit some meetings, and we kind of talked about this before we started, but one of the things I talked about with Dustin when I got here was, I've been trying and trying and trying. I've been doing this AA thing off and on. I've done the steps 10 times. And rather than having somebody throw it back and say, well, you're just not committed or you need to try harder or whatever, he was like, well, then don't do it. And I was like, what? He said, look, and again, just like with those other places, that is not a black mark on AA. It works for so many people. And at the same time, he said, if it isn't working for you, then it's okay to try other paths. But do something. Find connection, find community, find things individually, when you're waking up throughout the day, whatever it might be. After 5 times doing this, that. So it's necessary to do those things. So to answer your question, some meetings, a morning ritual, which I have stuck to this day. Dustin's book on the Stoics is one that I love, and I read that thing every day. Crazy enough, so I moved back to Kansas City a couple of months ago and got back into umpiring. And umpiring is interesting at my age because it's a tight-knit group. And in just 2 short months, number one, I've reconnected with quite a few buddies from the past because I used to do it like 10, 15 years ago.
Okay.
But I've made so many new friends in doing it. And, if I feel comfortable enough with, because you have a different partner almost every time.
Right.
We'll sit down, shoot the crap after the game. We're changing gear and stuff like that. And, I've told my crap to a handful of them, and the responses are amazing. One guy was like, wow, my full-time job's a pastor. And so I'm buddies with him now. And, a handful of other guys are like, dude, I can relate to exactly what you're talking about.
Totally.
I told him when I moved out here to Colorado, I moved out of here to hopefully save my life. And the point being, finding that connection, because when I'm in the depths of it, the last thing I want is connection. I was not going to the bars. I was locking the door, and that, pathetic individual that's just chugging all day with my dog with the door closed and didn't have any connection after a while. And so to get back to having that connection, and through other things too, but yeah, it's necessary and it's healthy, and it's just been awesome.
Totally. That's incredible. I guess, what level of umpiring do you do?
So I'm doing a lot of high school ball, high school tournaments. I have done some college, like summer league stuff, and I'm thinking I want to take this further. So I'm doing a camp in September. It's a 4-day camp, and I don't know enough yet, but apparently if you do well and get noticed, you could be looking at possible D2, even D1, and I would love that. Absolutely love that.
It's funny because it's not, I guess it's funny to think about, but, and I'm sure Dustin said this to you during your group, but he always said, like, allow your recovery to be a renaissance. Like, you have the opportunity now to leave here and do whatever you want, right? And it could be as professional, it could be as childish, whatever your dreams are, like, go for it.
Yeah.
Like, make the most of it. And I think I think back to, like, my early recovery, things I was doing and things I'm doing now, and like what the little things that make me happy are are just things that, like, I enjoy, and whether they be childish or whether they be super, like, corporate and professional, like, it makes me happy, and I get to choose those and make those decisions versus, like, me following a path of saying, like, this is what I think is the best thing to do to climb the corporate ladder, and this is what Joe Smith is doing, and this is what Johnny's whatever is doing, and this is what I need to do is to be perceived as this person.
Yeah.
Now it's like I sit back and I drive my own car and I make my own decisions.
Couldn't agree with you more. I had a great job with a great company for about 10 years. And looking back, I enjoyed it. And at the same time, I knew that it wasn't me. I am not corporate America. That's not my purpose, and I never felt that. I enjoyed it, and I am grateful for the years that I had there. But that said, another thing Dustin said was, whatever you do when you get out of here work-wise, don't dive right back into, I got to go find a job where I'm going to make 6 figures and be the top performer and blah blah blah. Interestingly enough, on January 1st, I started a job in Denver when I was still living out here. And it was I'm not going to go into detail, but I will simply say it was an office job, walking out the door at 6 a.m., walking back home at 6 or 7 p.m. And after 30 days, number one, the guy that I worked for was a jackass. But more importantly, I just, I'm sitting in rush hour traffic there, sitting in rush hour traffic on the way home. And I remembered what he told me, because I was starting to feel a little bit squirrely, and I bailed. And I do not regret that one bit. And it was at that time I thought, you know what? Here's your sign. It's time to go back to KC. That's where all 3 of my kids live now. I mean, they're adults, but they're all 3 back there, and 2 son-in-laws as well. And here's your sign. It's time. And so I got the ball rolling in February, and at the end of May, I moved back.
That's incredible. It's incredible that you had the wherewithal to like realize that and to make that decision. I'm also want to touch on the relationship you have with your kids now, what it's been like to I don't want to say rebuild, but to reconnect with them over this past year.
Well, here come the tears probably. You know, they're amazing kids. And in their early years, and for the record, their mom and I to this day communicate. We're friends. We're friendly. In the last month, you know, we all met up to celebrate our son-in-law's birthday, and we still do that to this day, which our kids greatly, greatly appreciate. And that part's really cool. But today, the relationship with them is just amazing. Last week, I went paddleboarding with my 30-year-old son, and you know, with my girls, I had a coffee date with one of my daughters 2 or 3 weeks ago, which was amazing. My oldest daughter lives about a mile away from me. A couple times I've just stopped by during the day. Now, I don't know if she liked me just stopping by unannounced, but that kind of stuff is, number one, the reason I moved back there, and number two, to have things back in a place where I'm dad again. And, you know, do they maybe still think about things in the back of their mind? Probably. I gave them good reason to.
Of course.
You know, did they maybe worry about me driving out here? You know, God, I hope he doesn't, you know, do something stupid. Probably I gave them a good reason to feel that way. But as every day goes by and they're seeing this, that's one more day. There was a tiny bit, let me say that in English, tiny bit more trust. There's a tiny bit more, I don't have to have that as something I worry about anymore. And that is a wonderful thing. And I want to, for the record, I've also got an amazing girlfriend back there. And so she and I started dating about the same time that I was falling off the cliff. Now, when we started, she didn't know I was falling off the cliff. And so it was around 4 or 5 years ago. And you know, shortly after my dad died and shortly after I decided, well, I can drink. And so she saw a lot of ugliness and went through a lot of ugliness. And when I moved out to Colorado, you know, I hated it from that relationship aspect, but I knew if I didn't do something drastic, then that wasn't going to matter anyway. And today, we're back together. Things are wonderful. You know, we're not crazy seeing each other every day and things like that. But it's one more gift, and it's one more of those promises that you talk about and that it talks about in the big book. They all freaking come true if you let them.
100%. And I think all you could do in life, from our perspectives, is to show up, be authentic, and do the right thing.
Yep. Right?
We're not curing cancer here. We're not telling you how to like live your life. Well, maybe a little bit, but like we're not trying to like you know, warp your brain and make you do things that are not the best things for you. You know, we're asking you to be yourself.
Yes.
You know, get a little uncomfortable, but be yourself and show up. And I think good things happen to those individuals. And that's such an incredible, such a touching story. And I think what I like to do when we wrap up is kind of get your opinion. And if you had the opportunity to talk to a new group of individuals that were in your shoes when you were struggling, you know, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I touched on it a little bit ago, but I would first and foremost say just do not be ashamed, embarrassed, humiliated to put your at that time it's really not true ego, but it's just, you know, I can't let anybody else know this. That's the worst thing you can do. And I know you can relate. I did it forever. And the more you try to hide it, the deeper you dig yourself in trouble. So it's okay to reach out for help. It's okay to let people close to you know. And in doing that, being open to feedback that they have for you. Now, we know things aren't going to go real swell with some family conversations, relationship conversations, work conversations. They don't always go well, but it's better to have those conversations and reach out as opposed to just stuffing it and stuffing it and stuffing it. And the next thing you know, you get a freaking DUI, you're in jail or worse, or you get fired or worse, or, you know, whatever it may be. Second thing is, I mean, finding a place like APN, you know, APN is not possible or practical for everybody, but at the same time, a place that dives into a lot more than just the basics of recovery, a place that teaches you about cognitive behavioral therapy and, you know, all of the things that we do here that some of the other places touch on it, but it was such a deep dive here that I felt like, you know, Dustin reached down into my very soul and pulled crap out that was still stewing in there. And that is so necessary.
And I'm going to go into Dustin's brain for a little bit. And what he would say, like when you compliment him, he always would say, you know, you did the work.
You did the work.
You did the work. And I think, listen, did he put you in the position to do the work? Probably. I say the same for myself. But you have to give yourself credit, man. Like,
oh, yeah. No question.
And like you have to, at the end of the day, pat yourself on the back. And my dad's in recovery, you know, and he has 20 years. And so like, I look at him and I'm sure your kids look at you and as like an inspiration, right? Like look at the work he did. It may not a bit, it's, you know, it's very similar to like, look at the work he put in the office, and it's probably even better to look at the work he did on himself. And you should be proud of that.
Yeah. And I am, to your point. And you know, it's for our personalities, sometimes it's hard to find being proud of yourself.
100%.
But it's okay to be proud of yourself. You're right. And
it took a lot of hard work getting here.
It did. And, you know, all the other 5 places, all that work was not for naught. I mean, I took little pieces from every place, right? And ultimately got me here. But back to the things you said about, you know, the kids. Had they lost me a couple of years ago, they would have gone to my funeral thinking, what a pathetic end. And they didn't. And today, you know, one thing I've given up is trying to be the white knight dad. I'm just Dave the dad.
Show up.
And today, you know, if I get hit by the proverbial bus tomorrow, they can say,
God forbid,
you know what? He started to get things figured out.
Absolutely.
And they can be proud. And that's, you know, that's a great feeling. Is it a testament to us? Yeah, it's okay to take credit because we do work our asses off. This is not easy, but it's also a testament to these folks here too. No question about it.
100%. 100%. Well, really, really appreciate you coming on, being authentic, being vulnerable. It means a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people that listen will be able to relate. And lastly, man, like you should be proud of yourself. Take the time to like congratulate yourself, man.
Yeah.
You should be.
Well, I appreciate that. And I echo that. And to anybody listening, echo that as well. It's okay to, you know, take some glory in the victories. And I never did that. You know, I would always focus on the negatives.
Or the next thing.
Yeah, or the next thing, right? And today life is simple. Life is good. Being sober is freaking awesome. And it's a wonderful thing.
Awesome.
Appreciate it, guys.
Yeah, thank you again. Thank you to everyone who is listening. We really appreciate it. If you want to see some other episodes with some other alumni, please visit apn.com/podcast. You could listen and even watch the videos there. You could also visit us at our YouTube. Just search APN Lodge and you'll see all of the podcasts located there. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to email us at pod@apn.com. That's pod@apn.com. Also, feel free to follow us on all of our social accounts, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. Our handle is @APN Lodge. Thank you again for listening and hope you enjoy the rest of your day.